Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And that the show you're watching today only exists because of DVD sales and something called Adult Swim? If you think you know everything about the Griffin family, you're about to discover some mind-blowing secrets that will completely change how you see this animated masterpiece. What I'm about to tell you goes way deeper than just random trivia. We're talking about hidden connections to other shows, real-world controversies that almost destroyed careers, and creative decisions that were so controversial they had to be completely rewritten. Some of these facts are so bizarre that even die-hard fans have never heard them. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Family Guy didn't just get canceled once, it got canceled twice. But here's where it gets really interesting. The first cancellation happened after just 2 seasons because Fox executives thought the humor was too edgy and the ratings weren't strong enough. Seth McFarland was devastated, but he had no idea that this cancellation would actually make the show more popular than it had ever been while it was on the air. Here's what happened during those dark years. Adult Swim picked up the reruns and started airing them late at night. Something magical occurred. The show found its true audience. College students and young adults were staying up late, discovering this irreverent animated comedy that pushed every boundary imaginable. The ratings on Adult Swim were phenomenal. Meanwhile, DVD sales were going through the roof. People weren't just buying the DVDs, they were buying multiple copies to give as gifts. Fox executives started paying attention when they realized they were sitting on a gold mine. The show they had thrown away was generating more buzz and making more money in reruns than most of their current programming. This led to one of the most unprecedented decisions in television history. In 2005, Fox brought Family Guy back from the dead, making it the first canceled primetime series to be revived due to DVD sales and cable reruns. But the resurrection came with a price. Seth MacFarlane had moved on. He was working on other projects and wasn't sure he wanted to return to the world of Peter Griffin. Fox had to offer him an incredibly lucrative deal, including creative control and the promise to produce 2 additional animated series. This is how we eventually got American Dad and The Cleveland Show. Now let's talk about something that will make you see Stewie Griffin in a completely different light. The character was originally designed to be much more evil and sinister. In early episodes, Stewie was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. But something interesting happened as the show evolved. Seth MacFarlane and the writers began to soften Stewie's character, making him more of a sophisticated intellectual trapped in a baby's body rather than a genuine psychopath. This transformation wasn't accidental. MacFarlane has revealed that Stewie's character development was influenced by his own experiences and observations about childhood intelligence. The writers began to explore the idea that Stewie's apparent evil tendencies were actually the result of a brilliant mind struggling to communicate in a world that couldn't understand him. This is why later episodes show Stewie as more emotionally vulnerable and seeking connection rather than domination. Here's something that might disturb you about the show's research process. The writers of Family Guy have one of the most extensive research teams in television. They don't just make random pop culture references. Every joke, every cutaway, every cultural reference is carefully researched and fact-checked. The team maintains massive databases of information about celebrities, historical events, movies, music, and current events. This is why their parodies are so accurate and cutting. But this attention to detail has gotten them into serious trouble. The show has faced numerous lawsuits from celebrities and public figures who felt they were portrayed unfairly or inaccurately. Some of these legal battles have cost the production millions of dollars. In several cases, entire episodes had to be re-edited or pulled from circulation to avoid further legal complications. One of the most controversial moments in Family Guy history involves a joke that predicted a real tragedy. In a 2013 episode, there was a sequence involving bombs and the Boston Marathon. When the actual Boston Marathon bombing occurred just weeks after the episode aired, conspiracy theorists went crazy. They claimed the show had inside knowledge of the attack. The truth is much simpler but equally disturbing. It was a coincidence, but it highlighted how the show's edgy humor sometimes intersects with real-world events in uncomfortable ways. The production process of Family Guy is unlike any other animated show. While most animated series take months to produce each episode, Family Guy operates on an incredibly tight schedule that requires episodes to be completed in just a few weeks. This is possible because of their unique production pipeline that allows multiple episodes to be in different stages of production simultaneously. Seth MacFarlane's involvement in the show has changed dramatically over the years. While he still provides the voices for multiple characters including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, he's much less involved in the day-to-day writing and production. This transition happened gradually as MacFarlane became more interested in live-action projects and music career. Many fans don't realize that some of their favorite recent episodes were created with minimal input from the show's original creator. The voice acting process reveals some fascinating secrets about the characters. Seth MacFarlane records Peter Griffin's voice by speaking in a lower register than his natural voice, which sometimes causes strain during long recording sessions. For Stewie, he uses a combination of his natural speaking voice with a refined English accent that he developed specifically for the character. Brian's voice is actually closest to MacFarlane's real speaking voice, which is why their conversations often feel the most natural. Here's something that will change how you watch the show forever. Many of the cutaway gags that seem completely random are actually connected to larger storylines that were planned but never fully developed. The writers keep extensive notes about potential character backstories and plot developments. Sometimes these ideas surface as quick cutaway jokes instead of full episodes. This means that seemingly throwaway gags might actually be glimpses into alternative versions of the show that could have existed. The relationship between Family Guy and The Simpsons is much more complex than the surface-level rivalry that fans discuss. Behind the scenes, there's actually a great deal of mutual respect between the creative teams. Several writers and animators have worked on both shows, and there are numerous hidden references and inside jokes that acknowledge this connection. The famous crossover episode took years to develop because both teams wanted to ensure they honored each other's creative legacy. The show's impact on popular culture extends far beyond just entertainment. Family Guy has influenced internet meme culture in ways that are still being discovered. The show's rapid-fire reference style and willingness to break the fourth wall helped establish many of the comedic conventions that now dominate social media and online content. Phrases and concepts from the show have entered everyday language in ways that most people don't even realize. One of the most closely guarded secrets about Family Guy involves the process of celebrity guest appearances. The show has featured hundreds of celebrity voices over the years, but the selection process is incredibly strategic. The producers maintain detailed profiles of celebrities, including their sense of humor, willingness to make fun of themselves, and potential controversy factors. Some major stars have turned down appearances because they weren't comfortable with how they might be portrayed. The animation style of Family Guy appears simple, but it's actually incredibly sophisticated. The character designs are deliberately simplified to allow for rapid production, but the background art and scene composition often contain incredible detail that viewers miss during casual watching. The animators hide visual jokes and references in backgrounds that are only visible when episodes are paused or watched at high definition. The show's relationship with censorship has evolved dramatically over the years. Early episodes pushed boundaries that would be considered tame by today's standards, while recent episodes deal with topics that would have been completely forbidden when the show began. This evolution reflects changing cultural attitudes, but it also shows how the creative team has learned to work within and around broadcasting restrictions. Family Guy's influence on other animated shows is immeasurable. The success of its revival proved that adult animated comedies could be viable long-term properties. This directly led to the creation or continuation of shows like Rick and Morty, Bob's Burgers, and numerous others. The show essentially saved the entire genre of primetime adult animation. The merchandising empire built around Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars annually, but most of this success comes from international markets rather than domestic sales. The show's humor translates surprisingly well across cultural boundaries, making it one of the most globally successful American animated properties ever created. Behind the scenes, the show operates more like a comedy writer's room than a traditional animation studio. The collaborative process involves dozens of writers, animators, and producers working together to create each episode. Ideas can come from anywhere, and the best concepts often emerge from casual conversations rather than formal brainstorming sessions. The legacy of Family Guy extends far beyond entertainment into academic study. Universities now offer courses that analyze the show's cultural impact, comedic techniques, and social commentary. The show has become a legitimate subject of scholarly research in fields ranging from media studies to sociology. As we look toward the future, Family Guy continues to evolve while maintaining the irreverent spirit that made it a cultural phenomenon. The show that once faced cancellation has become an institution, proving that sometimes the most unexpected successes come from taking creative risks and refusing to compromise your vision. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has fundamentally changed television comedy forever. These hidden aspects of its creation and evolution reveal a complex, carefully crafted entertainment machine that continues to surprise and provoke audiences worldwide. The next time you watch an episode, you'll see it through completely different eyes, understanding the incredible journey that brought these characters from cancellation to global cultural dominance. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice, and that Seth McFarland almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? And that's just scratching the surface of the absolutely wild behind-the-scenes stories that most people have never heard about this iconic show. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the channel, where we dive deep into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Today, we're exploring some absolutely mind-blowing Family Guy lore that even die-hard fans probably don't know about. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at Peter Griffin the same way again. But before we jump into these crazy stories, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because we're constantly dropping content about your favorite animated series that you won't find anywhere else. And if you're a true Family Guy fan, drop a chicken fight emoji in the comments right now. Let's start with something that literally changed the course of television history. Seth MacFarlane was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The only reason he wasn't on that plane was because he had been out drinking the night before and overslept, missing his flight by just 15 minutes. MacFarlane has talked about this in interviews, describing how his travel agent called him frantically when she realized what had happened. Can you imagine how different the world of animation would be today if he had made that flight? No Family Guy revival, no American Dad, no The Orville. It's one of those sliding doors moments that completely altered entertainment history. Speaking of near-death experiences, did you know that Family Guy has been canceled not once, but twice? The show originally ran from 1999 to 2002 before Fox pulled the plug due to declining ratings. But here's where it gets interesting. The show found new life through DVD sales and reruns on Cartoon Network's Adult Swim block. The DVD sales were absolutely unprecedented for an animated series at the time. We're talking about millions of copies sold, which was unheard of for a canceled TV show. Adult Swim's late-night reruns were pulling in massive audiences, often outperforming the original Fox broadcasts. The demand became so overwhelming that Fox had no choice but to bring the show back in 2005. But the cancellation drama didn't end there. In 2007, Fox canceled the show again, this time after Season 5. Once again, fan outcry and continued strong performance in syndication forced the network's hand, and they renewed it for a 6th season. It's pretty incredible when you think about it. Family Guy might be the only show in television history to be saved by its fans twice. Now, let's talk about some character secrets that will blow your mind. Stewie Griffin's sexuality has been a topic of debate for years. But Seth MacFarlane actually revealed in interviews that Stewie was originally conceived as a completely straight character who would eventually grow up to be a normal heterosexual adult. The gay undertones that fans picked up on were never intentionally written into the character initially. However, MacFarlane later embraced the ambiguity and has said that Stewie exists in a kind of pre-sexual state where his eventual orientation is deliberately left unclear. This explains why sometimes Stewie seems attracted to women, sometimes to men, and sometimes to neither. It's a fascinating example of how a character can evolve beyond their creator's original intentions. Here's something that might surprise you about Brian Griffin. He was almost killed off permanently way before that infamous Thanksgiving episode where he actually died temporarily. In the early seasons, there were multiple discussions about removing Brian from the show entirely because some writers felt his character was becoming too preachy and unlikable. The writers experimented with making Brian more flawed and hypocritical to balance out his intellectual pretensions, which is why we see him become increasingly alcoholic and self-absorbed as the series progresses. This character development wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to make him more interesting and less of a mouthpiece for liberal talking points. Let's dive into some voice acting secrets that most people don't know about. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire. Seth, but he also voices dozens of minor characters throughout the series. However, there are some characters he refuses to voice himself. For example, MacFarlane has stated that he deliberately doesn't voice any of the female characters because he believes women should voice female characters whenever possible. This is why actors like Alex Borstein voice Lois and Mila Kunis voices Meg. It's a surprisingly progressive stance for a show that often gets criticized for its treatment of female characters. Speaking of Meg, here's some dark lore about America's least favorite animated teenager. The character was originally supposed to be much more popular and central to the show's dynamic. In early concept art and scripts, Meg was portrayed as a typical popular high school girl who would serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin family. However, the writers quickly discovered that it was much funnier to make her the family scapegoat and punching bag. What started as occasional jokes about Meg being unpopular gradually evolved into the running gag where literally everyone treats her terribly. The writers have admitted that they sometimes feel bad about how mean the show is to Meg, but the jokes are just too funny to stop. Here's a piece of lore that connects to real-world tragedy. The show has made several references to Conway Twitty, the country singer, usually by cutting away to him performing full songs as a way to pad the episode runtime. These cutaway gags became a running joke about lazy writing and time filling. However, there's a darker story behind this. Conway Twitty died in 1993, years before Family Guy even existed. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that the Conway Twitty gags were actually inspired by his own father's love of the singer's music. MacFarlane's father would play Conway Twitty songs constantly when Seth was growing up, and the extended musical cutaways were a way of honoring that memory, while also poking fun at television's tendency to use musical performances as filler. Let's talk about some episodes that almost didn't make it to air. The episode titled Partial Terms of Endearment was actually banned from broadcast television entirely. The episode deals with abortion and surrogate pregnancy in typical Family Guy fashion, but the content was deemed too controversial for Fox's standards. The episode was completely finished and was supposed to air during Season 8, but Fox refused to broadcast it. It was eventually included on the DVD release and made available online, but it remains the only Family Guy episode that has never aired on television in the United States. The controversy surrounding this episode led to stricter content guidelines for the show going forward. Here's something about the show's animation that most people never notice. In the early seasons, the animation style was much more crude and simple, partly due to budget constraints, but also because of the technology available at the time. However, if you watch closely, you'll notice that the animation quality suddenly improves dramatically around Season 4. This wasn't just because of increased budget, it was because the show switched animation studios. The original episodes were animated by a small studio that specialized in low-budget television animation. When the show was revived, Fox invested in higher quality animation produced by a different studio with more advanced technology and techniques. But here's the weird part. Some fans actually prefer the cruder animation style of the early episodes. They argue that the rougher animation gave the show more character and charm. The newer episodes, while technically superior, sometimes feel too polished and corporate compared to the scrappy early seasons. Let's explore some celebrity connections that might surprise you. Patrick Stewart, who voices baby Susie Swanson, actually improvises most of his lines. The writers typically give him a basic outline of what the character needs to say, but Stewart adds his own Shakespearean flair to every line reading. Stewart has said in interviews that voicing a baby character allows him to explore comedy in ways that his serious dramatic roles don't permit. He's also revealed that he often comes up with the most outrageous and inappropriate lines for baby Susie, pushing the boundaries of what the censors will allow. Here's some lore about the show's most controversial episodes. The episode where Brian and Stewie are trapped in a bank vault together for the entire episode was actually written as a bottle episode to save money on animation and voice acting. However, it ended up becoming one of the most critically acclaimed episodes in the show's history. The writers have revealed that they were initially worried the episode would be boring since it only featured 2 characters in one location for the entire runtime. But the episode's success proved that the show worked best when it focused on character development and dialogue rather than just rapid-fire jokes and cutaway gags. Speaking of experimental episodes, did you know that the show has done several episodes that exist in alternate universes or different time periods? These aren't just random creative choices. They're actually part of a larger multiverse concept that the writers have been quietly building throughout the series. The writers have hinted that all of these alternate reality episodes are connected, and that there's a larger mythology about parallel dimensions that runs throughout the show. Most fans don't pick up on these connections because they're subtle and spread across multiple seasons, but dedicated viewers have started mapping out the multiverse timeline. Here's something about the show's music that most people don't realize. Seth McFarland is actually a trained singer and musician who has released several albums of standards and jazz music. Many of the musical numbers in Family Guy feature McFarland's actual singing voice, not just his character voices. McFarland has said that he uses Family Guy as a way to showcase different musical styles and pay homage to classic American songwriting. Some of the show's most elaborate musical sequences were specifically designed to highlight McFarland's vocal abilities and his love of traditional pop music. But here's the interesting part. McFarland has also revealed that he sometimes writes entire episodes around songs he wants to perform. The plot becomes secondary to the musical numbers, which explains why some episodes feel like they're structured more like variety shows than traditional sitcoms. Let's talk about some behind-the-scenes drama that most fans don't know about. There have been several major conflicts between the voice actors over the years, particularly regarding salary negotiations and creative control. The most significant dispute involved Mila Kunis, who voices Meg. During Season 7, there were reports that Kunis was considering leaving the show due to disagreements about her character's treatment and her compensation compared to other cast members. The situation was eventually resolved, but it led to changes in how Meg was written in subsequent seasons. Here's some dark lore about the show's influence on real-world events. Several episodes of Family Guy have been accused of predicting or inspiring real-world tragedies. The most notable example is an Innuendo episode that aired before the Boston Marathon bombing that featured Peter accidentally detonating bombs in Boston. The episode was pulled from reruns and streaming services after the bombing, and some conspiracy theorists claimed that the show somehow predicted the attack. Seth MacFarlane has addressed these claims, explaining that they're purely coincidental and that the show's writers don't have any special knowledge of future events. However, this incident led to increased scrutiny of the show's content and more careful consideration of how certain jokes and storylines might be interpreted in different contexts. Here's something about the show's international versions that might surprise you. Family Guy has been adapted for television in several different countries, and each version makes significant changes to accommodate local culture and censorship standards. The most interesting adaptation is probably the Arabic version, which removes all alcohol references, changes Brian from a dog to a cat, and significantly tones down the sexual humor. These changes are so extensive that the show becomes almost unrecognizable compared to the American version. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's clear that there's so much more to this show than meets the eye. From near-death experiences that changed television history to hidden multiverses and banned episodes, Family Guy has one of the richest and most complex backstories in animated television. These behind-the-scenes stories remind us that even our favorite comedies have real human drama and complexity behind them. The next time you watch Family Guy, you'll hopefully have a new appreciation for all the creative decisions, controversies, and coincidences that shape the show we know today. If you enjoyed learning about these hidden Family Guy secrets, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into your favorite shows. What other animated series would you like us to explore? Next, let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video, where we uncover even more secrets from the world of animation. Did you know that Family Guy was actually dead and buried for 3 entire years? And when it came back from the grave, it changed television forever in ways you probably never realized? Stick around, because what I'm about to tell you about the hidden depths of Family Guy will completely change how you see this seemingly simple cartoon. Most people think Family Guy is just random jokes and cutaway gags. But there's a secret layer of storytelling, hidden references, and behind-the-scenes drama that would make your head spin. From secret government conspiracies to real-world tragedies that shaped entire episodes, this show has more dark secrets than you might imagine. Let's start with something that sounds like a conspiracy theory, but is absolutely true. Family Guy predicted major world events with scary accuracy. And I'm not talking about lucky guesses. We're talking about specific details that aired months or even years before they actually happened in real life. Remember the episode where Peter accidentally damages a bridge? That episode aired in 2005, showing a bridge collapse in remarkable detail. Less than 2 years later, the Minneapolis bridge collapse happened in almost identical circumstances. Coincidence? Maybe. But wait, there's more. The show also depicted airport security scenarios that became reality after major policy changes. Episodes showing specific security procedures aired before those exact procedures were implemented in real airports. Either Seth McFarland is a time traveler, or the writers were paying very close attention to patterns most people missed. But here's where it gets really weird. The show once depicted a very specific type of terrorist attack involving planes, and this aired before certain real-world events that I can't get too detailed about without this video getting demonetized. The point is, Family Guy wasn't just making random jokes about current events. They were somehow tapping into the collective unconscious of what was coming next. Now let's talk about the show's death and resurrection, because this story is wilder than any episode plot. Family Guy was canceled in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Fox executives thought it was done forever, but here's what they didn't expect. The DVD sales went absolutely insane. People were buying Family Guy DVDs like crazy, and more importantly, Adult Swim started running reruns that pulled in massive ratings. Fox realized they had made a huge mistake. The show wasn't just popular. It was building a cult following that was growing stronger every day it was off the air. When Family Guy came back in 2005, something had fundamentally changed. The writers knew they had been given a second chance, and they went absolutely wild with it. The humor got darker, the references got more obscure, and they started breaking the fourth wall in ways that no animated show had ever done before. But here's the part that most fans don't know. The cancellation and resurrection created a split personality within the show itself. There's pre-cancellation Family Guy and post-cancellation Family Guy, and they're almost like 2 different shows entirely. Pre-cancellation Family Guy was more grounded. Sure, it was weird, but the characters felt like real people with real problems. Post-cancellation Family Guy became something else entirely. It became a commentary on television itself. A show that was constantly aware it was a show. This shift created what television historians now call the meta-revolution. Family Guy showed other animated shows that you could break every rule, reference your own existence, and make fun of the very network that pays you and still be successful. South Park, Rick and Morty, and countless other shows followed this blueprint. Speaking of breaking rules, let's talk about the episodes that almost didn't make it to air. There's a whole vault of Family Guy content that was deemed too controversial, too dark, or too legally problematic to broadcast. Some of these episodes have become legendary among fans who have never seen them. One infamous episode dealt with a real-world tragedy in such a specific way that it would have caused massive backlash. The episode was fully animated, voiced, and scored, but it was pulled at the last minute. Only a handful of people have ever seen it, and they're bound by non-disclosure agreements. Another banned episode featured a storyline that involved real political figures in scenarios that would have caused international incidents. The legal department shut it down so hard that even mentioning specific details could result in lawsuits. But here's what's fascinating about these banned episodes. They showed just how far Seth MacFarlane and his team were willing to push boundaries. They weren't just making a cartoon. They were conducting social experiments to see what society would tolerate. This brings us to one of the most interesting aspects of Family Guy lore: the show's relationship with censorship and standards. Every episode that makes it to air represents hundreds of battles fought behind the scenes between the writers and network executives. The writers developed an elaborate system for getting controversial content past the censors. They would intentionally include material they knew would be rejected, so that when they fought to keep the stuff they really wanted, it would seem reasonable by comparison. It's psychological warfare disguised as comedy writing. This strategy works so well that other shows started copying it. The Family Guy approach to dealing with censorship became the industry standard for pushing boundaries on television. Now let's dive into the character origins, because the backstories of these characters are way darker and more complex than you'd expect from a comedy show. Peter Griffin wasn't always the lovable idiot we know today. In early concept art and scripts, he was genuinely disturbing, almost psychopathic in his behavior. The writers had to gradually soften Peter's character because test audiences found him genuinely unlikable. But traces of that original darker Peter still show up in certain episodes, creating this weird cognitive dissonance where you're laughing at someone who, if you really think about it, should probably be in prison. Stewie's character evolution is even more interesting. He was originally conceived as a pure villain, a baby bent on world domination with no redeeming qualities. But as the show progressed, the writers started exploring what would make a baby want to destroy everything, and they discovered something profound about childhood trauma and family dynamics. The gradual softening of Stewie from villain to complex character represents one of the most sophisticated character development arcs in television comedy. But it happened so slowly that most viewers didn't even notice it was happening. Brian's character might be the most tragic of all. He represents the writer's own struggles with depression, alcoholism, and the feeling of being trapped in a life that doesn't match your dreams. Every time Brian has an existential crisis, it's the writers working through their own psychological issues on screen. This is why Brian's temporary death hit fans so hard. It wasn't just killing off a character, it was the writers symbolically killing off the part of themselves that they saw in Brian. When they brought him back, it represented their own decision to keep fighting through depression and creative frustration. The show's relationship with its own success is another layer of complexity that most fans miss. Family Guy became so popular that it started influencing real-world culture, but this success created a feedback loop that began changing the show itself. References to Family Guy started showing up in other TV shows, movies, and even news broadcasts. Politicians started making Family Guy references in speeches. The show went from commenting on culture to actually shaping culture, and this shift is reflected in the later seasons. The writers became increasingly aware that they were creating cultural touchstones, and this awareness changed how they approached comedy. Jokes that might have been throwaway gags in early seasons became carefully crafted cultural commentary in later seasons. This evolution created what media scholars call the recursive effect, where a piece of media becomes so influential that it starts commenting on its own influence. Family Guy didn't just break the fourth wall, it demolished the entire theater. Let's talk about the real-world consequences of Family Guy's cultural impact. The show has been credited with changing how people communicate, particularly in how they use pop culture references in everyday conversation. Before Family Guy, pop culture references in conversation were usually recent and obvious. After Family Guy, people started making increasingly obscure references, creating entire conversations that were essentially elaborate chains of cultural callbacks. This changed how humor works in social situations. The show also influenced how other media uses cutaway gags and non sequiturs. Everything from commercials to political campaigns started using Family Guy-style random humor to grab attention and create memorable moments. But perhaps the most significant impact was on censorship standards across all media. Family Guy pushed boundaries so consistently and successfully that it expanded what was considered acceptable on television. Shows that came after could go places that wouldn't have been possible before Family Guy paved the way. The voice acting in Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because there are layers of performance art happening that most people completely miss. Seth McFarland doesn't just voice multiple characters. He creates distinct psychological profiles for each voice that reflect different aspects of his own personality. Peter represents 10. McFarland's id, his impulse-driven, consequence-ignoring side. Brian represents his superego, his intellectual, morally concerned side. Stewie represents his ego, his ambitious, attention-seeking side. The show is essentially one person having a conversation with different aspects of himself. This psychological complexity extends to the guest voices as well. When celebrities appear on Family Guy, they're not just doing celebrity cameos. They're being integrated into this complex psychological ecosystem that McFarland has created. The show's approach to celebrity culture is particularly sophisticated. Rather than just making fun of celebrities, Family Guy examines the psychological impact of fame on both celebrities and the people who consume celebrity culture. This brings us to one of the most overlooked aspects of Family Guy, its commentary on media consumption itself. The show constantly references other TV shows, movies, and cultural phenomena, but it's not just making references for the sake of references. Each reference serves as a commentary on how media shapes our understanding of reality. When Peter acts out scenes from movies, he's demonstrating how deeply fictional narratives penetrate real human behavior. When the show parodies other TV shows, it's examining how different formats and styles influence how we process information. The cutaway gags aren't random interruptions. They're demonstrations of how the human mind actually works. We don't think in linear narratives. We think in associations, tangents, and random connections. Family Guy mirrors the actual structure of human consciousness. This psychological accuracy is why the show resonates so deeply with audiences. It's not just funny, it's cognitively familiar. The chaos of Family Guy matches the chaos of our own internal mental experience. The show's treatment of social issues is another area where there's more depth than meets the eye. While Family Guy often appears to make jokes at the expense of sensitive topics, careful analysis reveals a more complex approach to social commentary. The show uses humor to make serious points more palatable, but it also uses humor to expose the absurdity of certain social attitudes. When characters make prejudiced statements, they're usually portrayed as idiotic or ignorant, effectively undermining the attitudes they're expressing. This technique allows the show to address controversial topics without preaching, but it also creates ambiguity about what the show actually believes. This ambiguity is intentional, forcing viewers to think critically about the issues being presented rather than passively accepting predetermined conclusions. As we wrap up this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth considering what this all means for the future of comedy in television. Family Guy didn't just entertain audiences. It fundamentally changed what television could be and do. The show proved that audiences were hungry for more complex, self-aware entertainment that challenged traditional narrative structures. It demonstrated that comedy could be a vehicle for serious psychological and social exploration without losing its entertainment value. Most importantly, Family Guy showed that taking creative risks, even when they result in cancellation, can ultimately lead to greater success than playing it safe. The show's death and resurrection became a template for how creative properties can find new life through changing audience behaviors and consumption patterns. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching a cartoon about a dysfunctional family. You're watching a sophisticated piece of media art that changed television forever, influenced how we communicate with each other, and continues to push boundaries in ways that most viewers never fully appreciate. The real genius of Family Guy isn't in any single joke or episode. It's in how it managed to hide all this complexity behind what appears to be simple, silly humor. That's the ultimate magic trick, and it's still working after all these years. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off into dreamland. But instead of counting sheep, what if I told you some absolutely wild facts about one of television's most chaotic families? Tonight, we're diving deep into the bizarre, hilarious, and sometimes disturbing world of Family Guy, with facts so strange, they might just lull you into the most entertaining sleep of your life. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a journey through Quahog that's perfect for your bedtime routine. Whether you're a die-hard fan or just need something to occupy your mind as you wind down, these Family Guy facts will give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that might surprise you about the show's creation. Family Guy almost never made it to air in the first place. Seth McFarland created the pilot when he was just 24 years old, working as a writer and animator for Hanna-Barbera. The original pilot was so different from what we know today that it's almost unrecognizable. Brian wasn't even supposed to be the sophisticated martini-drinking intellectual we know and love. Originally, he was just going to be a regular dog who occasionally spoke. But McFarland decided that having a talking dog who acted completely normal would be funnier than having one who was still essentially just a pet. Speaking of Brian, here's a fact that might keep you thinking as you fall asleep. Brian Griffin is technically immortal in some episodes, but ages normally in others. The show has never been consistent about whether Brian ages like a regular dog or if he's somehow exempt from typical canine lifespans. In some episodes, he's mentioned to be around 7 years old in dog years, which would make him middle-aged. But in others, he references events from decades ago, as if he experienced them personally. This inconsistency is just one of many things that make Family Guy's continuity so fascinatingly chaotic. Now, let's talk about Stewie Griffin, the baby genius with questionable intentions. Did you know that Stewie's sexuality has been a subject of debate not just among fans but actually within the show's writing room? Seth MacFarlane has stated in interviews that Stewie is meant to be gay, but the character's sexuality has been portrayed inconsistently throughout the series. In early episodes, Stewie had crushes on various female characters, but later seasons have shown him with clear attractions to male characters. The writers have deliberately kept this ambiguous, which adds another layer to Stewie's already complex character. Here's something that might give you pleasant dreams. The voice actors for Family Guy are incredibly talented beyond just their work on the show. Seth MacFarlane, who voices Peter, Brian, and Stewie, is also an accomplished singer who has released several jazz albums. His singing voice is so good that he's performed with major orchestras and has even done tribute concerts to classic crooners like Frank Sinatra. Imagine Peter Griffin serenading you to sleep with smooth jazz standards. Let's dive into some facts about the show's most controversial character, Peter Griffin himself. Peter's weight has been a running gag throughout the series. But did you know that his exact weight has been mentioned multiple times with wildly different numbers? In some episodes, he's said to weigh around 270 pounds, while in others, the number jumps to over 300. The inconsistency is intentional, reflecting how the show treats Peter's physical characteristics as fluid depending on what's funniest for any given episode. Peter's job history is another source of endless entertainment and confusion. Throughout the series, he's worked at a toy factory, a brewery, various other random jobs, and has even been unemployed for extended periods. But here's what's interesting. The show never explains how the Griffin family maintains their lifestyle during Peter's unemployed periods. They live in a decent house in what appears to be a middle-class neighborhood, yet Peter's employment status seems to have no impact on their standard of living. It's one of those cartoon logic elements that you just have to accept. Speaking of the Griffin house, have you ever noticed that the layout seems to change between episodes? Sometimes there are rooms that appear out of nowhere, and other times, familiar rooms seem to vanish. The basement, in particular, seems to change size and purpose depending on the episode's needs. In some episodes, it's a small storage space, while in others, it's large enough to hold elaborate contraptions or even entire gatherings. This kind of flexible architecture is common in animated shows, but Family Guy takes it to particularly absurd lengths. Let's talk about Meg Griffin, the family's perpetual punching bag. Here's a fact that might surprise you. Meg was originally supposed to be the most normal character in the family, serving as the audience's point of view into this chaotic household. But as the show evolved, the writers found it funnier to make her the target of everyone's abuse. This shift happened gradually over the first few seasons, and by the time it was fully established, Meg had transformed from a relatable teenager into a character whose suffering was played for laughs. The voice of Meg has also changed throughout the series. Originally voiced by Lacey Shepard, the role was taken over by Mila Kunis starting in Season 2. The transition was so seamless that many viewers didn't even notice the change. Kunis was actually still a teenager when she started voicing Meg, making her closer in age to the character than most voice actors are to their animated counterparts. Here's a soothing fact about the show's animation style. Family Guy uses a technique called cutaway gags that allows for infinite creative possibilities. These brief segments, usually introduced by phrases like, "This is worse than the time," allow the animators to create completely different scenarios, time periods, and art styles within a single episode. Some of these cutaways reference obscure pop culture moments, while others create entirely fictional scenarios. The animators have said that creating these cutaways is one of the most enjoyable parts of working on the show because there are virtually no limitations on what they can create. Let's discuss some facts about Quahog, the fictional Rhode Island town where the Griffins live. The town's name is actually a type of clam, which is fitting given Rhode Island's coastal location. But here's what's interesting. The geography of Quahog seems to change depending on the episode's needs. Sometimes it's portrayed as a small town where everyone knows each other, while other times it seems large enough to support multiple shopping districts, airports, and major venues. The town has everything from a small town feel to big city amenities, depending on what the plot requires. The Drunken Clam, the bar where Peter and his friends hang out, is based on real bars that McFarland frequented during his college years. The atmosphere and the type of conversations that happen there are drawn from McFarland's actual experiences, which explains why the dialogue often feels so authentic despite the absurd situations. Here's something that might help you drift off. The show's theme song is intentionally designed to be catchy and memorable, but it's also shorter than most television theme songs. This was a deliberate choice to maximize the amount of time available for actual content in each episode. The brevity of the theme song allows for more jokes and story development, which is part of why Family Guy episodes often feel packed with content. Let's talk about some of the show's recurring characters and their origins. Glenn Quagmire, the Griffins' oversexed neighbor, was originally conceived as a minor character who would appear occasionally, but the writers found his character so entertaining that he became a regular part of the cast. His distinctive laugh and catchphrase, "giggity," weren't in the original character design, but developed naturally as the voice actor, Seth McFarland, experimented with the character's vocal patterns. Cleveland Brown, Peter's friend who eventually got his own spin-off show, was originally going to be a very different character. The writers initially conceived him as being more similar to Peter in personality, but they decided it would be funnier to make him the calm, rational member of the group. This decision led to Cleveland becoming the voice of reason among Peter's friends, often serving as a counterbalance to their more outrageous behavior. Joe Swanson, the paraplegic police officer, was created to add diversity to the show's cast, but the writers were careful to make his disability just one aspect of his character rather than his defining trait. In many episodes, Joe is the most competent and heroic character, often solving problems that the other characters can't handle. His wheelchair is rarely portrayed as a limitation, and he's often shown doing things that would be impossible for anyone, disabled or not. Here's a relaxing fact about the show's production schedule. Family Guy episodes are typically produced months in advance, which allows the animators and voice actors to take their time perfecting each episode. Unlike live-action shows that have to rush to meet weekly deadlines, animated shows like Family Guy can spend weeks on individual scenes, ensuring that every joke lands and every visual gag is perfectly timed. The show's writer's room operates on a collaborative system where anyone can contribute ideas, regardless of their official role on the show. This has led to some of the show's most memorable moments coming from unexpected sources. Sometimes the person responsible for continuity might suggest a joke that becomes central to an episode, or a voice actor might improvise a line that becomes a recurring catchphrase. Let's discuss some facts about the show's cultural impact that might give you something peaceful to think about as you fall asleep. Family Guy has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces the challenge of adapting American cultural references for international audiences. Some jokes that work perfectly in English become completely different jokes in other languages, while others are replaced entirely with references that local audiences will understand. The show's influence on internet culture has been enormous. Many of Family Guy's cutaway gags and memorable quotes have become memes that spread far beyond the show's original audience. The phrase, "oh no," in Peter's distinctive voice, for example, became a popular reaction GIF used in contexts that have nothing to do with the show itself. Here's something interesting about the show's approach to celebrity guest stars. Unlike many animated shows that cast celebrities to voice characters similar to themselves, Family Guy often has famous people voice characters that are completely different from their real personalities. This approach has led to some surprising and entertaining performances that showcase different sides of well-known actors and musicians. The show's approach to continuity is deliberately inconsistent, which actually makes it more relaxing to watch in some ways. You don't need to remember every detail from previous episodes to understand what's happening, because the show often contradicts its own established facts for the sake of a good joke. This means you can watch episodes in any order and still enjoy them fully, which is perfect for casual viewing or when you're trying to wind down. Let's talk about some facts about the show's music and sound design. Family Guy employs a full orchestra for many of its musical numbers, which is unusual for an animated television series. This attention to musical detail means that even throwaway songs and cutaway gags are often surprisingly well-produced and catchy. The show's composers have backgrounds in both television and theatrical music, which explains why many of the musical segments feel like they could work on stage. The sound effects in Family Guy are often created in unusual ways. The iconic sound of Peter falling down and hurting himself, which happens in almost every episode, is actually a combination of several different sounds layered together. The voice actors often provide their own sound effects during recording sessions, which gives the show a more organic feel than if all the sounds were added in post-production. Here's a fact that might help you smile as you drift off. The show's animators often hide small details in backgrounds that only the most observant viewers will notice. These Easter eggs can be anything from references to other shows, inside jokes among the production staff, or even tiny animations that have nothing to do with the main story. Finding these hidden details has become a hobby for some fans, who watch episodes multiple times just to catch things they missed. The show's approach to time and aging is fascinatingly inconsistent. While the characters never seem to get older, the show acknowledges the passage of time in other ways. Technology updates, cultural references change, and real-world events are incorporated into episodes. This creates a strange temporal bubble where the characters exist in a perpetual present that somehow includes decades of cultural history. Let's discuss some production facts that showcase the incredible amount of work that goes into each episode. A single episode of Family Guy requires thousands of individual drawings, even though much of the animation is now done digitally. Each character expression, each background element, and each special effect needs to be designed and animated individually. The attention to detail is remarkable when you consider how quickly episodes need to be produced. The voice recording process is also more complex than you might expect. While Seth McFarland voices multiple characters, he rarely records them in conversation with each other during the same session. Instead, each character's lines are recorded separately, and the conversations are constructed in post-production. This means that McFarlane has to imagine how his different characters would interact with each other and adjust his performance accordingly. Here's something soothing to consider. Despite all the chaos and controversy surrounding Family Guy, the show has created jobs for hundreds of people over its many seasons. Animators, voice actors, writers, musicians, sound engineers, and countless other professionals have built careers working on this show. In a way, all of this absurd humor has created a small community of creative people who work together to bring these ridiculous stories to life. The show's international success has also led to cultural exchange in unexpected ways. American animators have learned techniques from international studios, while animators from other countries have brought their own cultural perspectives to American television. This cross-pollination of ideas has enriched the medium of animation as a whole. As we near the end of our journey through these Family Guy facts, let's consider something that might give you pleasant dreams. The show's enduring popularity suggests that there's something universally appealing about stories of dysfunctional families who, despite all their problems, somehow stick together. Even though the Griffin family is exaggerated to absurd proportions, there's something recognizable about their dynamics that resonates with audiences around the world. The show's ability to find humor in everyday situations, even when those situations are taken to impossible extremes, reflects a fundamentally optimistic view of life. No matter how bad things get, there's always something to laugh about. This perspective can be oddly comforting when you're trying to wind down from your own day's challenges. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you can think about this wild, wonderful, and completely unpredictable animated world where anything can happen, where the impossible is routine, and where laughter is always just around the corner. Sweet dreams, and may your rest be as peaceful as a Quahog evening, minus all the explosions and chaos, of course. Whether you're a longtime fan or someone who's just discovered these bizarre facts, I hope this journey through Family Guy's strange universe has given you something entertaining to think about as you fall asleep. Remember, in the world of animation, anything is possible, and tomorrow is just another opportunity for new adventures and unexpected laughs. Picture this. You're lying in bed, ready to drift off to sleep, but your brain just won't switch off. Well, tonight's different. Tonight, we're going on a gentle journey through the wonderfully weird world of Family Guy with some truly fascinating facts that'll help ease you into dreamland. So get comfortable, close your eyes if you want, and let's explore the Griffin family universe together. Let me start with something that might surprise you. Peter Griffin wasn't always meant to be the bumbling father figure we know today. The creators originally envisioned him as more of a traditional sitcom dad. But Seth McFarland quickly realized that making Peter completely incompetent would be far more entertaining. This decision shaped the entire show's DNA, creating a character whose stupidity knows no bounds. Speaking of Peter's origins, here's a delightfully absurd detail about his background. According to the show's mythology, Peter is actually of mixed Irish and Mexican heritage, which explains some of his more colorful personality traits. His biological father, Mickey McFinnigan, lives in Ireland and has a talking sheep companion named O'Brien. When Peter finally meets Mickey, they bond over a drinking contest, because of course they do. It's these little touches of insanity that make Family Guy so uniquely entertaining. The Griffin family tree is absolutely bonkers when you really dig into it. Take Francis Griffin, Peter's strict Catholic stepfather who despised Lois for not being Irish enough. This man was so religiously rigid that he even dismissed the Pope's approval of Peter and Lois's marriage. But here's the kicker. Francis later became the Pope's special assistant. The irony is delicious, and it perfectly captures the show's love of contradictory character development. Now, let's talk about something that might help you sleep better: the show's approach to time and continuity. Unlike many animated series that maintain strict timelines, Family Guy operates in a floating timeline where characters can age or stay the same age depending on what the story needs. Stewie, for instance, has been 1 year old for over 2 decades, yet he's traveled through time, built complex inventions, and had philosophical discussions about existence. This fluid approach to reality creates a dreamlike quality that's oddly soothing. Here's a gentle fact about Chris Griffin that showcases the show's surprising depth beneath all the chaos. Despite being portrayed as academically hopeless, Chris actually has genuine artistic talent. In one episode, he gets accepted to art school, but chooses to stay with his family instead. It's moments like these that remind us there's heart underneath all the madness, even in characters who seem purely comedic. Let me share something about Stewie that's both fascinating and oddly comforting. His relationship with Brian the dog represents one of television's most unusual friendships. They've been through adventures across time and space. They've argued like an old married couple, and when Brian died, Stewie was so heartbroken, he literally rewrote time to save him. There's something beautiful about that level of devotion, even in a cartoon about talking dogs and genius babies. The voice acting in Family Guy is another soothing element worth considering as you drift off. Seth MacFarlane voices multiple main characters, including Peter, Brian, and Stewie, essentially having conversations with himself for hours during recording sessions. Imagine the surreal experience of being alone in a sound booth, switching between a baby's British accent, a dog's sophisticated tone, and a grown man's childish outbursts. It's like a one-person theater performance that's been going on for decades. Here's something wonderfully absurd about the show's background characters. Cleveland Brown, Peter's neighbor and friend, was originally just meant to appear in a few episodes, but his calm, measured way of speaking proved so funny when contrasted with Peter's chaos that he became a main character and eventually got his own spin-off show. Sometimes the best things in life happen by accident, which is a nice thought to carry into sleep. Let's explore some of the more obscure Griffin family members, because their stories have a mythical quality perfect for bedtime. There's King Arthur Griffin, an ancestor who could supposedly pull Excalibur from the stone. Then there's Moses Griffin, who led the Jews out of Egypt while complaining about billboards and demanding more Jolly Ranchers. The show creates these elaborate historical figures that exist purely to set up jokes, but there's something wonderfully imaginative about building an entire fictional lineage. The relationship between Stewie and his stuffed bear Rupert is oddly touching when you think about it. This genius baby, capable of building time machines and mind control devices, still needs his security blanket in the form of a simple teddy bear. It reminds us that no matter how complex we become, we all need something soft and familiar to hold on to. That's a comforting thought as you settle into your own bed. Family Guy's approach to cutaway gags creates a unique storytelling rhythm that's almost hypnotic. The show will interrupt itself mid-scene to show us a completely unrelated flashback or fantasy sequence, then seamlessly return to the main story. It's like how our minds work when we're falling asleep, jumping from one random thought to another without any logical connection. Yet somehow, it all flows together. Here's a fascinating detail about Meg Griffin that reveals the show's unexpected complexity. Despite being constantly mistreated by her family, actress Mila Kunis has mentioned in interviews that playing Meg taught her about resilience and finding humor in difficult situations. The character, who seems to exist purely for abuse, actually represents something deeper about perseverance and maintaining hope even when everything seems to go wrong. The show's relationship with censorship has always been playful rather than aggressive. When certain words can't be said on television, the characters find creative ways around it, often making the censored version funnier than the uncensored one would have been. There's something delightfully subversive about finding humor within constraints, like creating art within specific rules. Let me tell you about Brian's literary aspirations, which add a layer of melancholy to his character that's perfect for quiet reflection. He's constantly working on novels that never get published, struggling with alcoholism, and dealing with the existential crisis of being a talking dog in a world that doesn't quite make sense. His failures are deeply human, reminding us that everyone struggles with their dreams and disappointments. The background music in Family Guy deserves more recognition than it gets. The composers create these elaborate orchestral pieces for scenes that last only seconds, treating throwaway gags with the same musical attention as epic movie moments. There's something beautiful about that level of craftsmanship being applied to the most ridiculous situations imaginable. Quagmire's house being right next to the Griffins creates an interesting dynamic that's been running for over 20 years. These neighbors, who are simultaneously friends and enemies, who know each other's secrets but continue to be surprised by each other's actions. It's like a very slow, very weird sitcom relationship that unfolds over decades rather than seasons. The show's treatment of death is uniquely casual and somehow comforting because of it. Characters die and come back regularly. Time gets rewritten, and consequences are often temporary. In a world where permanence can feel overwhelming, there's something soothing about a universe where mistakes can be undone and second chances are always available. Here's something about the show's animation style that contributes to its dreamlike quality. The characters are drawn with simple, clean lines that make them feel both familiar and slightly unreal. Their movements are fluid but exaggerated, creating a world that feels just removed enough from reality to be purely entertaining rather than stressful. The recurring theme of Peter's various jobs throughout the series creates a sense of endless possibility. He's been everything from a bodega owner to a Renaissance artist to a country music star, often within the same season. There's something liberating about a character who can completely reinvent himself whenever the story demands it, suggesting that we all have infinite potential for change. Family Guy's approach to celebrity cameos is uniquely self-aware. When famous people appear on the show, they're often playing exaggerated versions of themselves, or completely different characters entirely. It creates this meta-textual layer where reality and fiction blend together in ways that feel dreamlike and surreal. The show's relationship with its own continuity is fascinatingly relaxed. Characters will reference events from previous episodes as if they happened, then completely contradict those same events in the next episode. It's like how dreams work. Everything makes perfect sense until you try to examine the logic too closely. let me share something about the show's writing process that might interest you as you drift off. The writer's room for Family Guy is known for being one of the most collaborative in television, with jokes being refined and improved by multiple people before making it to air. Each throwaway line has been polished by a room full of comedy writers, which explains why even the smallest moments often contain multiple layers of humor. The relationship between Lois and Peter represents something uniquely optimistic despite all their problems. No matter how much chaos Peter creates, no matter how frustrated Lois becomes, they always find their way back to each other by the end of each episode. It's a cartoon version of unconditional love that's oddly reassuring. Stewie's gradual evolution from would-be world conqueror to adventure-seeking toddler reflects the show's own maturation over time. Early Stewie was genuinely menacing, plotting elaborate schemes to murder his mother. Modern Stewie is more interested in friendship and exploration. It's like watching a character literally grow up, even though he's technically stayed the same age. The show's use of musical numbers creates these unexpected moments of pure joy in the middle of chaotic episodes. Characters will suddenly break into elaborate song and dance routines that rival professional Broadway productions, then immediately return to the mundane problems of suburban life. These musical interludes feel like shared dreams where anything is possible. Family Guy's approach to social commentary is gentle rather than preachy, which makes it perfect bedtime viewing. The show addresses serious topics through the lens of absurd situations, making complex issues feel manageable rather than overwhelming. It's comedy as comfort food, nourishing without being heavy. The longevity of the show itself is something worth contemplating as you prepare for sleep. Family Guy has been on television for over 2 decades, meaning that some viewers have literally grown up with these characters. There's something deeply comforting about having fictional friends who are always there, always ready to entertain you, no matter what's happening in your real life. Brian's death and resurrection storyline remains one of the most emotionally powerful moments in the show's history. When the writers temporarily killed off the beloved character, the fan reaction was so intense that they brought him back within a few episodes. It demonstrated that beneath all the irreverence and chaos, people genuinely care about these animated characters as if they were real friends and family members. The show's treatment of mundane activities, like grocery shopping, going to work, or sitting in traffic, transforms everyday boredom into comedic gold. There's something oddly therapeutic about seeing ordinary frustrations played out in exaggerated cartoon form. It makes your own daily annoyances feel more manageable and even potentially funny. Here's something beautiful about the show's approach to friendship. Peter's relationship with his drinking buddies at the Drunken Clam represents a very specific type of male bonding, sitting around, talking about nothing important, and just enjoying each other's company. In our increasingly connected but somehow isolated world, there's something nostalgic and appealing about that kind of simple, uncomplicated friendship. The show's relationship with its own past creates interesting layers of nostalgia. Characters will reference things that happened in earlier seasons as if they were childhood memories, creating this sense of shared history between the audience and the fictional characters. It's like having old friends who remember the same funny stories you do. As we near the end of our journey through Family Guy facts, consider how the show serves as a kind of modern folklore. These characters and their ridiculous adventures have become part of our shared cultural vocabulary. People quote Peter Griffin the way previous generations might have referenced folk tales or classic literature. In a weird way, the Griffin family has become America's unofficial cartoon family, as recognizable as any real celebrity. The show's ending credits often feature the characters sitting on their couch, watching television just like the audience is doing. It creates this mirror effect, where fiction and reality blend together in a peaceful domestic scene. After all the chaos and adventure of each episode, everyone ends up exactly where they started, at home, together, ready to do it all again tomorrow. And that's perhaps the most comforting thing about Family Guy. No matter how crazy things get, no matter what disasters befall the Griffin family, they always end up back home, safe and sound, ready for the next adventure. It's a universe where problems are temporary, love is permanent, and there's always something to laugh about, even in the strangest situations. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, take comfort in knowing that somewhere in the animated town of Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into some ridiculous situation that will somehow work out just fine by morning. Sweet dreams. And remember, No matter how weird your own dreams get tonight, they probably won't be any stranger than a typical Family Guy episode. Sleep well, knowing that laughter truly is the best medicine. Even in cartoon form, the Griffin family will be there tomorrow, ready to entertain you with more wonderfully weird adventures whenever you need them. Good night. Picture this. You're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone at 2 in the morning, and suddenly you're wondering about the most random Family Guy trivia that exists. Well, you've come to the right place, because tonight we're diving deep into the weirdest, most fascinating, and downright bizarre facts about everyone's favorite dysfunctional animated family, from secret voice actor connections to hidden Easter eggs that took fans decades to discover. These facts will blow your mind and give you plenty to think about as you drift off to sleep. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about Peter Griffin's voice. Did you know that Seth MacFarlane actually based Peter's distinctive voice on a security guard he met while working at Hanna-Barbera? The guard had this thick New England accent that MacFarlane found absolutely hilarious, so he started imitating it during production meetings. What's even crazier is that this security guard had no idea he was the inspiration for one of television's most iconic cartoon characters, until years later when a coworker pointed it out to him. Imagine finding out that your voice became the foundation for a character watched by millions of people worldwide. Speaking of voices, here's something that might surprise you about Meg Griffin. Originally, Lacey Shepard voiced Meg during the first season and part of the second season. But when she left to pursue other projects, Mila Kunis stepped in without anyone really noticing. The transition was so seamless that many longtime fans still don't realize there was ever a voice change. What makes this even more interesting is that Mila Kunis was initially hesitant to take the role because she felt bad about replacing another actress. Little did she know, she'd be voicing Meg for over 2 decades. Now let's talk about Stewie Griffin's accent, because there's a fascinating story behind that sophisticated British tone. Seth MacFarlane has revealed that Stewie's voice is actually inspired by Rex Harrison, the actor who played Professor Henry Higgins in the musical My Fair Lady. But here's the twist that most people don't know. MacFarlane originally wanted Stewie to gradually lose his accent as he got older, showing his American upbringing taking over. However, fans loved the accent so much that the creators decided to keep it permanently. This means Stewie's voice was supposed to be a temporary character trait that ended up becoming his most defining feature. Brian Griffin's character has one of the most unusual origin stories in animated television. Originally, Brian was going to be just a regular dog who couldn't talk. Seth MacFarlane only gave him the ability to speak because he needed a character who could serve as the voice of reason in the Griffin household. But here's what's really wild. Brian's personality is largely based on MacFarlane's own political views and personal struggles with alcoholism. In many ways, Brian serves as MacFarlane's animated alter ego, which explains why the character often breaks the fourth wall and seems more aware of the show's absurdity than other characters. The Griffin family's house has appeared in other Seth MacFarlane shows, but not in the way you might expect. The layout and design of the Griffin home was actually recycled and modified for use in American Dad as the Smith family residence. If you look closely at both houses, you'll notice they share remarkably similar floor plans, just with different decorations and color schemes. This was done to save time and money during production, but it created an unintentional connection between the two shows that eagle-eyed fans discovered years later. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, was originally supposed to be much darker in tone. The initial concept had Cleveland dealing with serious issues like racism, economic struggles, and family dysfunction in a more realistic way. However, Fox executives pushed for a lighter approach that would better match Family Guy's comedic style. This decision ultimately led to the show's cancellation after 4 seasons, as it never quite found its own identity separate from its parent series. Here's a fact that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single background character in Quahog has a name and backstory, even if they only appear for a few seconds. The writers maintain detailed files on hundreds of minor characters, including their occupations, family relationships, and personality traits. This level of world building is incredibly rare in animated comedies and helps explain why Quahog feels like a real town despite all its absurdities. The famous chicken fight scenes between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken weren't originally planned to become a recurring gag. The first fight scene was supposed to be a one-time joke, but the animation team had so much fun creating it that they kept extending the sequence. What was originally planned as a 30-second bit became a multi-minute epic battle that destroyed half of downtown Quahog. The positive fan reaction convinced the writers to bring back the chicken fights as a regular feature. Lois Griffin's piano playing isn't just for show. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, is actually an accomplished pianist in real life. During recording sessions, she often plays the piano parts herself rather than having them added in post-production. This gives Lois's musical performances a more authentic feel and allows Borstein to better connect with the character during emotional scenes involving music. The show's timeline is intentionally confusing, and there's a specific reason for this creative choice. Seth MacFarlane wanted Family Guy to exist in a floating timeline where characters never age and current events can be referenced without dating the show. This means that episodes from 1999 and episodes from 2023 can both reference contemporary events as if they're happening simultaneously. It's a narrative technique borrowed from comic books, where characters like Batman have been fighting crime for decades without aging. Meg's unpopularity among her family and peers was originally supposed to be temporary. The writers planned to give her a character development arc where she eventually found her confidence and earned respect from others. However, the jokes about Meg being ignored and mistreated became so popular with audiences that the writers decided to make it a permanent aspect of her character. This decision has created one of the most consistent running gags in the show's history. The Family Guy writing room operates under a unique rule. Any writer can pitch a cutaway gag at any time, regardless of what's being discussed. This policy has led to some of the show's most memorable non-sequitur moments, including random historical events, celebrity parodies, and completely absurd scenarios. The writers keep a massive database of unused cutaway ideas that they can draw from whenever they need to fill time or add extra laughs to an episode. Here's something that might change how you watch the show. Many of the most quotable Peter Griffin lines were completely improvised by Seth MacFarlane during recording sessions. MacFarlane has a habit of going off script and trying different variations of lines until he finds something that makes the entire recording booth laugh. These spontaneous moments often end up being the most memorable parts of episodes, proving that sometimes the best comedy comes from pure improvisation. The character of Joe Swanson was created specifically to challenge stereotypes about people with disabilities. Rather than being defined by his wheelchair, Joe is portrayed as incredibly capable, often more physically impressive than his able-bodied friends. His character was inspired by real police officers and military veterans who continued serving their communities despite physical challenges. Writers worked closely with disability advocacy groups to ensure Joe's portrayal remains respectful and empowering. Family Guy holds a unique record in television history. It's the only show to be canceled twice by the same network and brought back both times due to fan demand. The first cancellation happened after the second season due to low ratings, but DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim generated such a passionate fan base that Fox decided to revive it. When it was canceled again after the third season, the fan campaign was even stronger, leading to its permanent return and eventual status as one of Fox's longest-running shows. The show's animation style deliberately mimics classic cartoons from the 1960 seconds and 1970 seconds. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching shows like The Flintstones and The Jetsons, and he wanted Family Guy to have that same timeless cartoon aesthetic. This choice means that episodes from the early 2000s don't look dated compared to more recent episodes, helping the show maintain visual consistency across more than 2 decades of production. Stewie's sexual orientation has been a subject of fan speculation for years, and Seth MacFarlane has given conflicting answers about it intentionally. MacFarlane has stated that Stewie's sexuality is meant to be ambiguous and fluid, reflecting the complexity of human identity. This decision allows the character to work in various comedic contexts, without being confined to specific stereotypes or expectations. The Griffin family dog Brian was almost replaced permanently in 2013, but the decision was reversed after just 2 episodes due to overwhelming fan backlash. The writers killed off Brian and introduced a new dog named Vinny, planning to make this change permanent. However, the negative fan reaction was so intense that they quickly brought Brian back to life and wrote Vinny out of the show. This incident demonstrated just how attached audiences had become to the original characters. Here's a production secret that few fans know. Many of Family Guy's most elaborate action sequences are animated by the same team that works on major Hollywood animated films. When the show needs complex chase scenes, fight sequences, or musical numbers, they often hire freelance animators who normally work on Disney or Pixar movies. This explains why certain Family Guy sequences have surprisingly high production values compared to typical television animation. The town of Quahog is loosely based on several real New England locations, but it's primarily inspired by Cranston, Rhode Island, where Seth McFarland spent time during his childhood. Many of Quahog's landmarks and businesses are based on real places that McFarland remembered from his youth. The Drunken Clam Bar, for example, is inspired by a combination of several actual bars in the Providence area. Cleveland's voice actor Mike Henry made the unusual decision to step down from voicing the character in 2020, stating that a black character should be voiced by a black actor. This decision led to extensive recasting and rewriting to maintain character continuity while respecting the importance of authentic representation in voice acting. The transition process involved careful collaboration between Henry, the new voice actor, and the writing team to preserve Cleveland's established personality. Family Guy episodes often contain hidden references to other Seth MacFarlane projects, including American Dad and The Orville. These Easter eggs are scattered throughout episodes in the form of background details, character names, and brief visual gags. Finding all these connections has become a hobby for dedicated fans who maintain detailed databases of cross-references between MacFarlane's various shows. The show's musical numbers are often more complex than they appear on screen. Many of the songs featured in Family Guy episodes are full-length compositions that get edited down for television. Complete versions of these songs exist and are sometimes released as bonus content or special features. The writers and composers put significant effort into creating these musical sequences, often treating them as mini-musicals within the larger episode structure. Quagmire's famous giggity catchphrase was originally supposed to be used only once as a throwaway joke. Seth MacFarlane was experimenting with different ways to express the character's perverted excitement when he stumbled upon the giggity sound. The phrase became so associated with Quagmire that it's now impossible to imagine the character without it, showing how sometimes the most memorable elements of fictional characters emerge completely by accident. The Family Guy universe contains numerous characters who have appeared across multiple episodes spanning decades, creating one of the most extensive animated fictional communities on television. Background characters like the greased-up deaf guy, the evil monkey, and various Quahog residents have their own continuing storylines and character development arcs that careful viewers can track across seasons. These random facts barely scratch the surface of Family Guy's incredibly detailed fictional world. From voice acting secrets to animation techniques, from character development decisions to production challenges, every aspect of this show has fascinating stories behind it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy knowing that somewhere in Quahog, the Griffin family is probably getting into another ridiculous adventure that will entertain audiences for years to come. Sweet dreams, and remember, when life gets you down, at least you're not Meg Griffin trying to fit in at James Woods High School. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed, scrolling through your phone, and you stumble across something so unexpectedly fascinating that you forget you were even tired? Well, tonight we're diving deep into the chaotic, bizarre, and surprisingly complex world of Peter Griffin from Family Guy. And trust me, by the time we're done unraveling his entire story, you'll understand why this seemingly simple cartoon dad is actually one of television's most intricate characters. Most people think they know Peter Griffin. Fat guy, drinks beer, fights a giant chicken, right? Wrong. What if I told you that Peter's backstory involves multiple identities, time travel, alternate dimensions, and a family tree so twisted it makes soap operas look straightforward? What if I told you that this bumbling father figure has actually died and been resurrected more times than most comic book heroes? Tonight, as you drift off to sleep, let me paint you the complete picture of Peter Griffin's existence, from his mysterious birth to his countless near-death experiences, and everything in between. Because once you see the full scope of his story, Family Guy will never look the same again. Let's start at the very beginning, because Peter's origin story is far more complex than you might imagine. Peter Justin Griffin wasn't always a Griffin. He was born Peter McFinnigan in Mexico, though the circumstances of his birth are shrouded in mystery and contradiction. His biological father, Francis Griffin, was an ultra-religious Irish Catholic man whose stern demeanor would later shape much of Peter's rebellious adult personality. But here's where things get interesting. Peter spent his early childhood believing he was Irish, embracing this identity with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can muster. However, his world was turned upside down when he discovered through a series of revelations that his heritage was far more complicated than he ever imagined. The man he thought was his father figure, Francis, represented everything Peter would grow to rebel against: rigid religious doctrine, conservative values, and an inability to express joy or spontaneity. This early trauma of identity confusion would follow Peter throughout his entire life. Think about it. How many episodes revolve around Peter discovering something new about his past or his identity? It's not coincidence. It's the fundamental driving force of his character. He's constantly searching for who he really is, because his foundation was built on uncertainty. Peter's adoption by the Griffin family brought him to Rhode Island, specifically to the fictional town of Quahog. Now, Quahog itself is practically a character in Peter's story. This small New England town serves as both his sanctuary and his prison. It's where he's built his adult life, but it's also where he's trapped in cycles of behavior that prevent him from growing beyond his teenage mentality. The Griffin household on Spooner Street became Dater, Peter's universe, and understanding the dynamics of this home is crucial to understanding Peter himself. His relationship with his adoptive family shaped his approach to his own family later in life. The lack of a strong father figure during his formative years explains so much about his parenting style with his own children. Speaking of his children, let's talk about Peter as a father, because this is where his story becomes truly complex. Meg, Chris, and Stewie Griffin represent three different aspects of Peter's own personality reflected back at him. Meg embodies his insecurities and need for acceptance, which is why he treats her so harshly. He's rejecting the parts of himself he dislikes most. Chris represents his simple, well-meaning nature, which is why Peter can sometimes be genuinely caring toward him. And Stewie? Stewie represents Peter's intelligence and ambition, the parts of himself he never developed or explored. The way Peter interacts with each child tells us more about his internal psychology than any therapy session could. When he's cruel to Meg, he's being cruel to his own perceived inadequacies. When he's protective of Chris, he's protecting his own innocence. And when he's bewildered by Stewie, he's confronting the intellectual potential he never realized. Then there's Lois, and oh boy, is their relationship a masterclass in dysfunction disguised as sitcom comedy. Lois Peterschmidt Griffin comes from wealth and privilege, everything Peter never had growing up. Their marriage represents Peter's ultimate conquest. He managed to win over someone completely out of his league, but it also represents his greatest fear, that he's not worthy of love or success. Peter's constant need to prove himself worthy of Lois drives many of his most outrageous schemes and adventures. Every time he starts a business, learns a new skill, or attempts to become famous, he's really trying to prove that Lois was right to choose him. The fact that she stays with him despite his countless failures isn't just comedy gold, it's the foundation of Peter's entire worldview. Now let's talk about Peter's professional life, because his career history reads like a resume from an alternate dimension. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, tried his hand at entertainment, and held countless other jobs. Each career change represents Peter's ongoing search for his true calling, his desperate attempt to find something that gives his life meaning beyond just being a husband and father. The Pawtucket Patriot Brewery isn't just where Peter works, it's where he found his tribe. His friendship with Glenn Quagmire, Cleveland Brown, and Joe Swanson represents the family he chose for himself. These relationships are arguably the most stable and consistent in his entire life. While his family relationships are complicated by obligation and expectation, his friendships exist purely because he enjoys these people's company. But here's what's fascinating about Peter's friend group: they're all fundamentally broken in their own ways, just like him. Quagmire's hypersexuality, Cleveland's passive nature, and Joe's physical limitations all serve as mirrors for different aspects of Peter's own struggles with masculinity, ambition, and physical insecurity. The infamous chicken fights with Ernie the Giant Chicken deserve special attention because they represent something deeper than just absurd comedy. These epic battles symbolize Peter's relationship with obstacles in general. Instead of finding reasonable solutions to problems, Peter's instinct is to meet challenges head-on with disproportionate force and stubbornness. The chicken fights are metaphors for how Peter approaches every conflict in his life, with excessive energy, poor planning, and a refusal to back down even when he's clearly outmatched. Peter's death and resurrection experiences are another crucial element of his story that often gets overlooked. He's technically died multiple times throughout the series, only to return as if nothing happened. These deaths aren't just reset buttons for the show. They represent Peter's resilience and his refusal to let anything, including mortality, keep him down. Each resurrection reinforces his belief that he's somehow special, somehow protected, which feeds into his often reckless behavior. The alternate timeline and dimension episodes reveal even more about Peter's character. When we see versions of Peter from different realities, we're seeing the paths his life could have taken under different circumstances. Some versions are more successful, others are more tragic, but they're all recognizably Peter at their core. This suggests that regardless of circumstances, certain aspects of his personality are fundamental and unchangeable. Peter's relationship with authority figures throughout the series follows a consistent pattern that traces back to his complicated relationship with his biological father, Francis. Whether he's dealing with his boss, Mr. Weed, later Angela, or any government official, Peter's default response is rebellion. He can't help but challenge authority, not because he has a well-reasoned philosophical objection to hierarchy, but because authority reminds him of the rigid control he experienced in his early religious upbringing. His various business ventures and get-rich-quick schemes reveal Peter's deep-seated belief that success should come easily. This isn't just laziness. It's a fundamental misunderstanding of how achievement works, likely stemming from his upbringing where religious doctrine promised rewards for faith rather than effort. Peter applies this same magical thinking to business, relationships, and personal growth. The running gags and catchphrases that define Peter aren't just comedy elements, they're coping mechanisms. His nigh-he-he-he laugh, his random pop culture references, and his tendency to break into song are all ways he deflects serious, emotional moments. Peter uses humor as a shield against having to confront the deeper issues in his life. Peter's body image and relationship with food tell another important part of his story. His weight isn't just a visual gag. It represents his relationship with comfort and self-control. Food is Peter's primary source of comfort, his go-to solution for stress, boredom, and emotional pain. His eating habits are directly tied to his emotional state, which is why dramatic moments in his life often involve food in some way. The flashback episodes that show Peter at different ages reveal how his core personality traits were established early and have remained remarkably consistent. Young Peter displays the same impulsiveness, the same need for attention, and the same difficulty with authority that define adult Peter. This consistency suggests that Peter's behavior isn't really about his circumstances. It's about deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and responding to the world. Peter's occasional moments of genuine wisdom and insight are perhaps the most revealing aspects of his character. When he drops his usual antics and speaks from the heart, we see glimpses of the person he could be if he wasn't so afraid of being vulnerable. These moments are rare, but they show that Peter's intelligence and emotional capacity are much greater than his usual behavior suggests. His relationship with popular culture and media consumption reflects modern society's relationship with information and entertainment. Peter absorbs pop culture references without really understanding their context or meaning, much like how many people today consume information. He's a character designed for the internet age, even though he was created before social media existed. The international episodes where Peter travels to different countries reveal his American-centric worldview, while also showing his capacity to adapt when forced out of his comfort zone. These adventures don't fundamentally change him, but they do show that he's capable of growth when his usual coping mechanisms aren't available. Peter's various nemesis throughout the series, from the chicken to his own father to random authority figures, all represent different aspects of his internal struggles. He's not really fighting these external enemies. He's fighting parts of himself that he can't accept or integrate. As we wrap up this deep dive into Peter Griffin's complete story, It's important to recognize that his character represents something universal about the human experience. We all struggle with identity. We all rebel against aspects of our upbringing. We all fear that we are not worthy of the love we've received, and we all use various coping mechanisms to avoid confronting our deepest insecurities. Peter Griffin isn't just a cartoon character. He's a mirror reflecting our own struggles with adulthood, responsibility, and self-acceptance. His story is ultimately about someone trying to figure out how to be a good person despite being fundamentally unprepared for adult life. And in that struggle, we see ourselves. So the next time you watch Family Guy, remember that you're not just watching random comedy sketches. You're witnessing the ongoing saga of a man wrestling with the same questions we all face. Who am I really? Am I good enough? And how do I build a meaningful life when I feel completely overwhelmed by the complexity of existence? Sweet dreams. And remember, we're all just trying to figure it out as we go along, just like Peter Griffin.
Have you ever wondered what happens when celebrities get roasted so hard by Family Guy that they actually fight back? Tonight, we're diving into the wild world of bruised egos, angry tweets, and even courtroom drama. Some of these reactions will shock you. Others might make you laugh, but all of them prove that not everyone can take a joke when Seth McFarland comes calling. Picture this. You're an Oscar-winning actor at the top of your game, and suddenly millions of people are watching an animated dog make fun of your nose. That's exactly what happened to Adrien Brody. And let me tell you, he did not find it amusing. During a murder mystery episode where characters are getting picked off one by one, Tom Tucker gets cornered by the other guests who think he's the killer. When they finally take him down, someone delivers this brutal line about casting Brody in a movie adaptation, basically saying nobody would want to watch it. But Family Guy wasn't finished with poor Adrien yet. They doubled down with another scene featuring Meg on a date watching a 3D movie. What's playing on screen? Adrien Brody doing shirtless sit-ups, and his famously prominent nose literally pokes out of the screen in full three-dimensional glory. It's the kind of visual gag that makes you cringe and laugh at the same time. So, how did the Academy Award winner handle being the butt of these jokes? Not gracefully. According to Seth MacFarlane himself, in interviews, Seth revealed that when he approached Brody at a Hollywood party to smooth things over, mentioning how much he enjoyed one of Brody's films, the actor made it crystal clear that there were definitely hard feelings. No amount of compliments about his work could undo the sting of those animated jabs. This brings us to our next celebrity casualty. And this one gets really messy because it involves politics and personal family matters. Sarah Palin found herself in Family Guy's crosshairs during an episode where Chris goes on a date with a girl who has Down syndrome. During their dinner conversation, the girl casually mentions her family background, specifically that her mother used to be the governor of Alaska. Now, unless there's another former Alaskan governor out there with a child named Ellen, this was clearly aimed at Sarah Palin and her family situation. The timing made this particularly sensitive because Palin's son, who has Down syndrome, was only 2 years old at the time. The Palin family's reaction was swift and fierce. Sarah took to social media calling Family Guy a pathetic cartoon and labeling the creators heartless jerks. But she didn't stop there. She appeared on television talk shows, describing the writers as cruel and cold-hearted people who had crossed a line by making jokes about the disabled community. Family Guy fired back through Seth MacFarlane, who pointed out something interesting during his own television appearance. The character making those comments was actually voiced by Andrea Friedman, an actress who herself has Down syndrome. This actress later clarified that she felt the joke was directed at Sarah Palin personally, not at people with disabilities, and she even suggested that Palin simply didn't have a sense of humor about the situation. But sometimes Family Guy doesn't even need to directly target someone to cause controversy. Chloe Grace Moretz learned this the hard way when she became collateral damage in an internet phenomenon. During an episode where Peter decides to lose weight so he can ride a roller coaster, he sets his sights on looking as good as a character called Legs Go All the Way Up Griffin. This character was basically a visual gag. All legs with no torso. The joke itself had nothing to do with Moretz, but someone online photoshopped her picture to match this character design, and the image went viral across social media platforms. While the internet found it hilarious, Moretz definitely didn't. She publicly stated that this manipulated image seriously affected her body image and self-confidence, causing her to retreat from public appearances for a while. The cruel irony is that Family Guy never even mentioned her name, but she still got caught in the crossfire of internet culture. Speaking of crossing lines, Family Guy once ventured into territory so sensitive that it sparked outrage from disability advocates, religious groups, and grieving family members alike. They decided to create a school play episode featuring Terry Schiavo, the woman who became the center of one of America's most heartbreaking right-to-die legal battles. In typical Family Guy fashion, they turned this tragic real-life situation into a musical number performed by preschoolers. The kids sang cheerful songs with lyrics comparing Schiavo to an expensive plant that should just be unplugged. Even within the show, Brian questioned whether it was too soon for such material. But that didn't stop the episode from airing. The backlash was immediate and intense. Terry's own brother, Bobby Schindler Jr., was so furious about what he saw as insensitive treatment of his family's tragedy that he actually called for Fox to cancel Family Guy entirely. Religious groups and disability advocates joined the chorus of criticism, arguing that some subjects should be off-limits, even for satirical comedy. Now, getting roasted by Family Guy hits different when you're a comedian yourself. Rachel Bloom, creator and star of Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, discovered this firsthand during an episode where Brian impulsively marries a woman with cancer. The storyline gets complicated when the woman's cancer goes into remission, leaving Brian stuck in a marriage he never really wanted. To make matters worse for Brian, his new wife gains weight, develops some unpleasant habits, and constantly gushes about her favorite television show. That's where Family Guy took their shot at Bloom's creation, having the character describe Crazy Ex-Girlfriend in dismissive terms, focusing on a musical number about menstruation, and suggesting that watching such shows makes someone unattractive and unlikable. Bloom's reaction was more nuanced than outright fury, but she definitely wasn't laughing. She pointed out that the scene reeked of male condescension, essentially equating appreciation for her show with being an undesirable woman. While she didn't launch a full-scale public campaign against Family Guy, her response made it clear that she felt the jab was rooted in sexist assumptions about female-created content. Sometimes, though, celebrities handle Family Guy roasts with unexpected maturity. Dax Shepard found himself on the receiving end of a quick but cutting intelligence joke during an episode where Brian discovers he has a brain tumor. When the family learns the tumor is benign and debates whether Brian should have surgery, someone quips about whether Dax Shepard turned out all right, clearly questioning his intelligence. Rather than ranting on social media or giving angry interviews, Shepard took a different approach. He brought up the joke directly with Seth McFarland during an appearance on his own podcast. He acknowledged that he understood the writers weren't trying to be malicious and recognized the nuanced nature of comedy, but he was honest about the fact that it still stung a little. This mature, direct conversation probably earned him more respect than any angry response could have. One of the most interesting cases involves James Woods, who went from being Family Guy's most willing participant to eventually walking away from the show entirely. For years, Woods not only tolerated being parodied but actively participated, voicing an exaggerated version of himself in multiple episodes. He played up his persona as a chaotic, scheming character who would steal identities, fake his own death, and constantly torment the Griffin family. Woods initially embraced the self-parody, even refusing payment because he genuinely enjoyed making fun of himself. This collaboration worked brilliantly for both parties, giving Family Guy a celebrity who was game for anything while allowing Woods to show his sense of humor. But by 2018, something changed. Woods became more politically vocal on social media, and when Family Guy offered him another episode, he turned it down. He tweeted that he felt the new material was too politically biased, and worse than being offensive, it simply wasn't funny anymore. He accused the show of becoming mean-spirited rather than genuinely comedic. After that public criticism, Woods disappeared from Family Guy entirely, marking the end of one of their most successful celebrity partnerships. The most extreme legal response came from Carol Burnett, who decided that if Family Guy was going to use her intellectual property, she was going to make them pay for it literally. The controversy stemmed from a brief scene where Quagmire visits an adult bookstore, and viewers catch a glimpse of Burnett's iconic charwoman character from her classic sketch show working as a janitor. The appearance lasted maybe 2 seconds and seemed relatively harmless by Family Guy standards, but Burnett saw it as a serious violation of her rights. She filed a lawsuit against Fox, claiming copyright infringement and misuse of her character without permission. She wasn't seeking a small settlement either. Reports indicated she wanted somewhere between $2 and $6 million in damages. The legal system didn't side with Burnett, however. Judge Dean Pregerson dismissed the case, ruling that Family Guy was protected under First Amendment parody provisions. Interestingly, though, the judge did note that while the show was legally protected, he found the scene distasteful and offensive to Burnett personally. So while she didn't win any money, she did get judicial acknowledgement that her feelings were valid. These reactions reveal something fascinating about celebrity culture and comedy boundaries. Some stars, like Dax Shepard and initially James Woods, showed they could laugh at themselves and engage constructively with satirical content. Others, like Adrian Brody and Sarah Palin, felt genuinely hurt and responded with public criticism. Still, others like Carol Burnett saw legal violations that needed addressing through the court system. What makes Family Guy's celebrity controversies particularly interesting is how they reflect broader conversations about comedy, free speech, and personal dignity in the digital age. When a show has millions of viewers and endless social media amplification, even a brief joke can follow someone around for years. The internet's ability to turn a 2-second gag into a viral meme, as happened with Chloe Grace Moretz, demonstrates how modern comedy can have unintended consequences. The show's approach to sensitive topics like disability, terminal illness, and personal tragedy also raises questions about whether any subject should be off-limits for satirical treatment. The Terry Schiavo episode particularly highlighted this tension, with critics arguing that some real-life situations are too painful and recent for comedic treatment, while others defend the right to satirize any public figure or event. From a psychological perspective, these celebrity reactions also reveal how public figures cope with being reduced to punchlines. Adrian Brody's continued resentment suggests that some people never fully recover from being mocked on such a large scale, especially when the jokes focus on physical characteristics they cannot change. Sarah Palin's fierce defense of her family shows how comedy can become deeply personal when it touches on sensitive family matters. The gender dynamics in some of these controversies are also worth examining. Rachel Bloom's observation about male condescension in comedy writing reflects broader conversations about how female creators and their work get treated in predominantly male-dominated comedy spaces. Her measured but critical response showed how women in entertainment often have to balance standing up for themselves while avoiding being labeled as humorless or overly sensitive. James Woods' evolution from enthusiastic participant to critic illustrates how political polarization can affect entertainment relationships. His willingness to mock himself disappeared when he felt the show's political perspective diverged too far from his own beliefs, suggesting that even self-deprecating humor has limits when it conflicts with personal values. The legal aspects, particularly Carol Burnett's lawsuit, highlight the complex intersection between parody rights and intellectual property protection. While courts generally protect satirical content under free speech provisions, celebrities still have legitimate concerns about how their likenesses and creations get used without permission, especially in commercial contexts. These stories also demonstrate the power dynamics between individual celebrities and large entertainment corporations. When Family Guy makes a joke, it has the backing of major networks and widespread distribution, while individual celebrities often have limited recourse beyond public statements or legal action. This imbalance can make satirical attacks feel particularly unfair to those being targeted. The internet's role in amplifying these controversies cannot be overlooked. Social media platforms allow both celebrities to respond directly to perceived slights and fans to create additional content that extends the original jokes in unexpected directions. Chloe Grace Moretz's experience shows how online communities can take a television gag and transform it into something more personally damaging than the original creators intended. Looking at the long-term impact of these controversies, it's clear that some celebrities never fully recover their relationship with Family Guy or its fan base. Adrian Brody's continued resentment years later suggests that animated mockery can create lasting professional and personal damage. Other celebrities like Shepard seem to have moved on more successfully by addressing the situation directly and maturely. The varying reactions also reflect different approaches to celebrity image management in the digital age. Some stars try to ignore satirical attacks, hoping they'll fade away naturally. Others engage directly, either through humor or criticism. Still others pursue legal remedies when they feel their rights have been violated. None of these approaches seems universally successful, suggesting that there's no perfect way to handle being satirized by popular media. These celebrity feuds with Family Guy ultimately reveal the complex relationship between comedy, fame, and personal dignity in contemporary entertainment. While satirical shows claim the right to mock public figures, those figures retain the right to respond, criticize, and seek legal remedies when they feel boundaries have been crossed. The ongoing debates about these controversies suggest that society is still figuring out the appropriate balance between comedic freedom and personal respect. As entertainment becomes more personalized and social media makes everyone more accessible, these questions will likely become even more complicated. Whether you think these celebrities were justified in their reactions or believe they should have just laughed it off, one thing is clear. Family Guy's willingness to target anyone and everyone has created a fascinating collection of bruised egos and public feuds that continues to spark conversation about the limits and responsibilities of satirical comedy. Want to dive deeper into Family Guy controversies and see why so many people are calling for the show to be canceled entirely? Check out our next video exploring the growing backlash against the series and whether all this controversy is finally catching up with Seth MacFarlane's creation. Think you know everything about your favorite fictional families? Tonight, I'm about to shatter everything you thought you knew about the characters we grew up watching. What if I told you that beneath the laughs and heartwarming moments, these beloved family shows have been hiding some seriously dark psychological truths? Get ready, because we're diving deep into the twisted minds of television's most iconic families, and trust me, you'll never look at them the same way again. Welcome back to another mind-bending exploration, where we peel back the layers of pop culture to reveal the uncomfortable realities lurking beneath the surface. I'm your host, and today we're embarking on a journey that will fundamentally change how you view family dynamics on screen. We're not just talking about quirky character traits or funny running gags here. We're exposing genuine psychological disorders, toxic behaviors, and dysfunctional patterns that would make any therapist's notebook overflow with red flags. Have you ever wondered why certain family sitcoms feel so uncomfortably familiar? Why we laugh at situations that, in real life, would have us calling social services? That's because these shows, intentionally or not, mirror the darkest aspects of human psychology wrapped in a comedic package. Tonight, we are unwrapping that package and examining what's really inside. Let's start with something that might shock you about animated families. You know those characters we quote daily and consider harmless entertainment? Well, they're actually perfect case studies for some of the most destructive personality traits known to psychology. Take the concept of narcissistic behavior patterns, for instance. We see characters who consistently put their own desires above family welfare, manipulate situations to benefit themselves, and show zero empathy for others' suffering. Consider how often we witness parents in these shows making decisions that directly harm their children's emotional development. They dismiss their kids' feelings, mock their aspirations, and create environments where psychological safety doesn't exist. Yet we laugh because it's presented as comedy. The truth is, if these behaviors occurred in real families, we'd recognize them as forms of emotional abuse. But the darkness goes deeper than individual character flaws. These shows often normalize dysfunction by presenting it as typical family life. Children viewers internalize these relationship patterns as normal, potentially carrying these toxic blueprints into their own future families. It's a cycle that perpetuates unhealthy dynamics across generations, all disguised as entertainment. Let's examine the phenomenon of scapegoating within fictional families. There's almost always that one family member who bears the brunt of everyone else's dysfunction. They become the emotional dumping ground, the target of ridicule, and the convenient explanation for all family problems. This character serves as the family's pressure valve, allowing other members to avoid confronting their own issues by projecting everything onto this unfortunate soul. What's particularly disturbing is how these scapegoated characters are often portrayed as deserving their treatment. The show's narrative subtly suggests that their suffering is justified, teaching audiences that certain people are acceptable targets for cruelty. This psychological manipulation is incredibly sophisticated and deeply harmful, especially when absorbed by impressionable viewers. Moving on to another dark pattern, we see frequent examples of emotional manipulation disguised as parental love. Characters use guilt, shame, and conditional affection to control family members' behavior. They withdraw love as punishment and offer it as reward, creating anxious attachment patterns that would haunt real children for life. The scary part is how these manipulation tactics are often presented as caring parental behavior. Financial dynamics in these fictional families also reveal disturbing truths about power and control. Money becomes a weapon used to maintain dominance hierarchies within the family unit. Characters leverage financial dependency to strip away others' autonomy, creating situations where family members must choose between self-respect and survival. This economic abuse rarely gets labeled as such within the show's context, but it's a form of domestic violence nonetheless. Then there's the normalization of substance abuse as a coping mechanism for family stress. Characters regularly turn to alcohol or other substances to deal with their dysfunctional relationships, and this behavior is consistently portrayed as acceptable or even admirable. The message sent is that chemical numbing is preferable to addressing underlying problems, a philosophy that has destroyed countless real families. The violence, both physical and emotional, that permeates these shows is staggering when you really analyze it. Characters assault each other, destroy property in fits of rage, and engage in psychological warfare that would traumatize actual family members. Yet because it's animated or comedic, we're conditioned to view this violence as harmless fun rather than recognizing it as abusive behavior that mirrors real-world domestic violence patterns. What about the complete absence of healthy conflict resolution in these families? Disagreements escalate to explosive confrontations, problems get swept under the rug rather than addressed, and family members hold grudges that span entire seasons. There's never any genuine communication, compromise, or emotional growth. Instead, conflicts either explode into chaos or get ignored until they fester into something worse. The gender dynamics in these shows often perpetuate harmful stereotypes that reinforce toxic relationship patterns. Male characters are frequently portrayed as bumbling, emotionally unavailable, and incapable of basic actions. Adulting skills. Female characters often become long-suffering martyrs who enable bad behavior while sacrificing their own needs. These portrayals normalize codependency and emotional labor imbalances that plague real relationships. Let's talk about the children in these fictional families, because their treatment is perhaps the most disturbing aspect of all. They're often parentified, forced to take on adult responsibilities while their actual parents remain childlike. They become emotional caretakers for dysfunctional adults, a role reversal that stunts their development and robs them of childhood innocence. The shows present this as maturity or responsibility, but it's actually a form of childhood emotional abuse. The sibling dynamics portrayed are equally problematic, characterized by intense competition, jealousy, and cruelty. Siblings are pitted against each other for parental attention and approval, creating lifelong rivalries rather than supportive bonds. The message conveyed is that family members are competitors rather than allies, fostering an environment where trust and cooperation become impossible. Privacy and personal boundaries are consistently violated in these fictional families. Characters rifle through each other's belongings, eavesdrop on private conversations, and invade personal space without consequence. This normalized boundary violation teaches viewers that family members don't deserve privacy or respect, setting up expectations that healthy relationships cannot meet. The way mental health issues are handled in these shows is particularly troubling. Characters displaying clear signs of depression, anxiety, or other psychological conditions are mocked rather than supported. Their struggles become punchlines, rather than opportunities for compassion and understanding. This portrayal stigmatizes mental health challenges and discourages seeking help. Perhaps most disturbing is how these shows handle consequences for toxic behavior. Characters rarely face meaningful repercussions for their harmful actions. They might receive temporary comeuppance, but by the next episode, they're back to their destructive patterns without any real change or growth. This lack of consequences suggests that toxic behavior is acceptable as long as you're family. The enablement that occurs within these family systems is staggering. Instead of holding destructive family members accountable, other characters make excuses, cover up problems, and adapt their own behavior to accommodate dysfunction. This teaches viewers that enabling is loving, and that challenging toxic behavior is disloyal, perspectives that trap people in abusive relationships. Financial irresponsibility is often glorified in these shows, with characters making impulsive decisions that endanger their family's security. Yet there are rarely long-term consequences for these choices, sending the message that financial stability is unimportant and that someone else will always clean up the mess. This attitude contributes to cycles of poverty and instability in real families. The constant chaos and unpredictability in these fictional homes would be traumatic for real children. There's no stability, security, or peace. Instead, children live in environments where they never know what crisis will erupt next, what mood their parents will be in, or whether their basic needs will be met. This chronic stress would cause lasting developmental damage in reality. What's particularly insidious is how these shows use humor to make abuse palatable. When terrible behavior is packaged as comedy, our psychological defenses are lowered. We laugh at situations that should horrify us, gradually becoming desensitized to toxicity. This comedic reframing is a powerful tool that makes dysfunction seem normal and acceptable. The isolation these fictional families experience from healthy outside relationships is another red flag. They rarely maintain friendships or connections with functional people who might challenge their toxic patterns. This isolation prevents reality testing and allows dysfunction to flourish unchecked, much like how abusive relationships cut victims off from support systems. The power dynamics within these families are often rigidly hierarchical and authoritarian rather than collaborative and democratic. Decisions are made by whoever has the most power, regardless of how those decisions affect other family members. This teaches children that relationships are about dominance and submission, rather than mutual respect and partnership. Educational neglect is rampant in these fictional families, with parents showing little interest in their children's learning or development. Academic achievement is either ignored or mocked. Extracurricular activities are dismissed as unimportant, and intellectual curiosity is discouraged. This attitude toward education perpetuates cycles of underachievement and limits children's future opportunities. The way these shows handle emotions is deeply problematic. Genuine feelings are ridiculed, emotional expression is punished, and vulnerability is treated as weakness. Family members learn to suppress their authentic selves to survive, creating fake personas while their true needs go unmet. This emotional suppression leads to profound psychological damage over time. Perhaps most tragically, these fictional families never model what healthy relationships actually look like. Viewers, especially children, don't see examples of mutual respect, effective communication, genuine affection, or supportive problem solving. Without these positive models, they lack blueprints for creating healthier relationships in their own lives. The normalization of chaos as family life is perhaps the most damaging message these shows convey. They suggest that dysfunction is inevitable, that all families are messed up, and that toxic behavior is just part of human nature. This fatalistic view prevents people from recognizing that healthy families do exist and that change is possible with effort and commitment. As we wrap up this disturbing journey through the psychology of fictional families, I want you to consider how these portrayals might have influenced your own expectations about family life. Have you normalized behaviors in your own relationships that you wouldn't accept from strangers? Have you laughed off red flags that deserved serious attention? Have you repeated patterns you learned from these shows without questioning their healthiness? The power of media to shape our understanding of normal is immense, and these family shows wield that power irresponsibly. They present dysfunction as entertainment while failing to acknowledge the real pain such behaviors cause in actual families. By recognizing these patterns, we can begin to break free from toxic blueprints and create healthier relationships. Remember, just because something is common doesn't make it healthy. And just because something makes us laugh doesn't mean it's harmless. Real families deserve better than the chaos and cruelty we've been taught to accept as normal. You deserve better. Your future family deserves better. If this analysis has opened your eyes to patterns in your own life, consider seeking support from mental health professionals who can help you develop healthier relationship skills. Remember that recognizing dysfunction is the first step toward healing, and that breaking cycles of toxicity is one of the most loving things you can do for yourself and future generations. What did you think of this deep dive into the dark psychology of fictional families? Did any of these patterns surprise you? Or did they confirm suspicions you already had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more content that challenges the narratives we've been fed. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and most importantly, stay committed to creating healthier relationships than the ones we see on screen.